On today's episode, I spoke with Mike Gutfraynd. Man, that name just rolls off the tongue. Mike is a fractional CFO who helps $20 to $100 million companies grow and stay profitable. With Christmas spirit in the air and potential new tariffs looming, Mike and I broke down Santa's financial operations and discussed what it would take for Santa to set up a US office, including what KPIs he should measure and be successful. We also spoke about corporate cultures, the importance of pragmatic decision making, and risk. Why does any of this matter? And more importantly, why should you listen? I personally have never hired a CFO before, so the burden or blessing of financial tracking has always fell at my feet. Maybe if I spoke with Mike 20 years ago, it wouldn't take me that long to figure out what's important and what's not, which I pretty much did through trial and error, some of which was very expensive. If you're starting or running a business, you'll find good info in this episode. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and good luck. Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Appreciate it. Good to be here.
I figured in the Christmas spirit, let's maybe come up with a hypothetical scenario, and let's pick it apart from your standpoint of being a fractional CFO. Because if you ask an average human being what a CFO is, not a lot of people actually know what that means. And when you ask them what a fractional CFO is, even less people, I think, know what that is. And so, again, with Christmas coming up, I figure let's take a company that Mr. Chris K runs in the north of Europe, and he's got a little toy business that he's distributing toys to children all over the world, and he's expanding his operations into North America, and he's looking to bring a finance guy on board to help him with that endeavor. And the question to you is, what should he look for in bringing somebody who's a senior level finance guy?
Interesting question. Basically, it comes down to someone that's going to make the expansion successful. At the end of the day, that's really what the start is. So it's not about numbers, it's not about figures, it's about what's going to be successful. And success is defined differently by different people. So you might find that the typical answer is, well, it's profitable. Well, okay, well, if it's profitable, what's the level of profit you want to achieve? Maybe you want to be the low-cost Santa Claus, and you want to give the most amount of people presents, and that's your goal. Well, then your volume is going to be pretty high, and you're going to make probably a smaller margin on each present that you're selling to the parents that are going to put the present under the tree. Maybe you want to have a specific type of present that you're giving. I have no idea. Whatever that is for, it's for first and second graders, and that's your target market. And maybe it's high end, low end, medium end, kind of a middle class gift, whatever it is. You want to know what the market is, how much, what you can possibly do, and then everything flows from there. So what's going to be the total addressable market? How much are you looking to spend? What's the capital it's going to take to do that? So, you got to make all the presents before you sell all the presents. It's going to take money to make that happen. How much money do you need? Who are the people that you need to hire in order to expand your operations? If you're just servicing Europe and all of a sudden you go to North America, well, you've got population size, it's close, a little less in Europe. So let's say you're going to grow do you need to grow your space by 80%, 100%? Do you need to grow your workforce by whatever percent, or do you want to make your current operations more efficient so that you can, make more toys? You can make double the toys with 50% more investment so that your profitability overall on your global market of toys is higher. Those are all kind of the questions that need to get answered. And then from there, you dive in to all the specifics that need to be answered on it. So, and you can dive deep all the way to, which vendors you're selecting, where you're getting the financing, how much you're paying for, for the financing, for the interest to expand your operations, all the way down to what systems are you going to use to track all these things, and make sure that your compatibility, that, you might be using DHL in Europe, and you might be using combo FedEx and UPS and USPS in the US. How are you going to integrate all those things so that they're all automated and all the parents can track their presence where they are?
Mm-hmm. That's a great answer, actually. I I didn't expect you to go in that much detail, but it's interesting because, having run a small business, that's essentially everything you track. You basically have to think about kind of all aspects of operations in terms of money availability, money spent, return on investment, all the KPI metrics that essentially you're mentioning. How are you gonna meet the lead time of these parents trying to get the products under the tree in the way that traps the most margin, profit, cash flow, all those things essentially on the operation side. And I didn't realize all these things actually fall on the side of the CEO, I think, or CFO. I think, again, never having had a CFO because of our size, um, all of those things kind of felt on the owners.
Yeah, and that's typically what happens. And really, when you get to a certain scale, and everyone's definition of what that scale is different, but when you get to a certain scale, it's basically having it's not just a financial partner, it's a person that has system thinking to distill big ideas into specific monetary measurement units of how to actually accomplish that, and make sure that whatever that company is makes money and doesn't run out of money. And those are two different things. So you can make a lot of money, but if you require a lot of capital to do that, you may run out of money even though your company's making money. So it's just having financial building block partner that thinks in a systemized way to partner to help grow or turn around or sell or scale or whatever the goal is to the business.
And so how common is it for owners to handle that versus having a role of a CFO, for example?
It depends on the size of the business. So once you start going certainly above a $50 million business, it's pretty common to have that. Fairly common to have it above 20 million. Below 20, you typically don't see that, just because there's not enough room, unless you have a very high margin business. There's not enough room to have a full-time resource that's working side by side with you. And it just doesn't make sense for the business. It doesn't need it.
So what changes between, the under 20 to over 20 that kind of puts you in that space? Does it become just too much to handle as kind of the responsibilities of the owner operator shift to other parts of the business, whether it's production or sales or something else, and they just don't have time to kind of fully be on all sides of it.
That pretty much. I mean, as you grow, the CEO does not have time, and quite honestly, should not spend time doing every single thing and being involved in every single piece of the business. And that's not to say that they don't need to know what's going on in every piece of business. It's to say that they shouldn't be handling the day-to-day ongoing path of working in the business. They need to work on the business. And they need to be thinking about what the next thing is and having a team in place, not just on the finance side, but also on sales and marketing and operations, HR, to get all those things that they need to get done. And you just, as you grow and have more scale, you need more specialization. There's always counter arguments of, well, in my scenario this, in my scenario that. We're talking about the 90 to 95% general rule applying. As you grow and scale, you need people that are specialists in what they do, and that makes the sum of the parts more than 2 plus 2 equals 4.5. That's how you get there. By having specialists that do it, that know their areas and work together for the greater common goal of that company.
Yeah, and that's exactly right, because I think I find we weren't quite at those numbers, but I found that had we hired somebody who was more senior level, finance guy, CFO, director of finance, there just wouldn't be enough things for them to do on a daily basis, which I think is where the fractional side comes in.
Yeah, so I personally, I spend my time mostly in kind of $20 to $100 million businesses. And that's, I've spent most of my career there. And it's kind of for me, that's what I enjoy, because it's in between once you get over 100 million, you're really scaling on a whole different level. And the journey from 20 to 100 that's what's interesting. That's what I enjoy. You still get to, there's some team and there's some scale in place to not have to do things yourself, but there's not so much scale that it takes a while to kind of work through bureaucracy and get things done. So
yeah, it's like more risk versus less risk, essentially, in order to make decisions.
So, well, it's
how much risk filters you have to go through in order to implement a decision, essentially.
You can get things done pretty quickly, but there's also some scale to help you get those things done.
Yeah, the scale is also interesting because I find that it takes a different mindset and potentially a different group of people to kind of scale each of these paths. And I've heard that, and I don't know if it's true, it's just hearsay, that like every 1/3 or every 3x essentially of scale becomes its own little kind of operational unit. So it's like 0 to 100 almost, or 0 to 1,000,000 is like, you need one mindset. It's very entrepreneurial, kind of all hands on deck, sleeves rolled up. Then like 1 mil to like 3 mil, that's a whole different thing. And then like 3 mil to 9 mil. And then once you get past like $10 million, it's a completely different mindset, which I think is then you have kind of less entrepreneurial and more, MBA types coming in and kind of building a larger picture thing. And again, that's my thoughts on it, having not gone through that myself. I just knew that when we were kind of at this like under $10 million revenue, as we were inching towards 10 million, like all systems essentially started breaking because they were all set up for a different type of operation in terms of scale.
Yeah, that's fair. And it's that is generally the case, and there's a saying, what got you here won't get you there.
Mm.
That's what that is, and that can apply to a whole bunch of stuff, not just scaling a business and finance. It could be anything, but it does require a mind shift. But it's also very critical not to lose those beginning stages into as you grow. So that entrepreneurial mindset of do what it takes to get it done should never be lost.
Mm-hmm.
But
At any
it's
scale.
at any scale. Do what it takes to get it done should not be lost at any scale. But the breadth of what it takes to get it done may change.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got a billion-dollar company. There are so many different departments and divisions and locations that making one change has ripple effects. Making what you think is one small change, when you're $5 million business, is very, very different at a billion-dollar business. And there are so many ripple effects to that take place when you make that change. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. It just means you need to know what those are and know that at that scale, there are many more repercussions that happen. And then you're prepared for them and kind of weigh the upsides and the downsides. But, sometimes you have to build the plane on the way, down as you're flying. But if you're doing that over and over and over and over, you're just going to crash.
Yeah, you're doing something wrong for sure, especially at larger scale, because you don't know how wide those tentacles are gonna go. It's like, you're dumping all of your mortgage shares, and now the economy is fucked.
Yeah, I mean it's thinking through those things, but also having a bias to go versus not go, but know that sometimes going is the wrong choice. Sometimes not doing anything is the right choice. So a bias for not doing something is an action. That is an action.
Right.
So it's you're choosing not to do something, and the people there's a guy that slightly smarter than me called Jeff Bezos. He has a framework of kind of one-way and two-way door conversations. So if there's a two-way door, meaning you can come back from it, it's a lot easier to kind of make that decision, because the key thing is if you're wrong, you admit that you're wrong and you reverse course, and it's okay. You're like, the only thing that's going to get hurt is your ego. If you correct a prior wrong decision, it's okay. Like, as long as it's correctable. But a one-way door conversation is, you can't correct it. So you're building a tech company and you make a choice to build, I'm not a super tech guy, but like you make your choice to build on a certain language platform versus another language platform. You can't take that back because they're not compatible with each other. So you need to make the right choice and be thoughtful. But if you're choosing, I don't know, you're choosing the new product line for the year, and it's the colors for the your new sweaters are going to be blue, green, and orange, and you shouldn't have picked orange, and the color this year was brown.
Taupe. Right.
Whatever, like, okay, like maybe you can come out a month later with the right color. Maybe it just you take your losses and learn how you can make a better decision for the next season or for the next you know product category, whatever it is. There's things that can be corrected, but if you don't make that choice and you wait so long to figure out what the right color for the season is, well, you're just not going to make anything because the season's going to pass you by. And by the time you learn what the right color is for the season, you've sold nothing because you can't make the product in time.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to look at it, because I think this also parlays into kind of other aspects of life. It's essentially low risk or high risk decision making, or slightly higher risk. It's all risk tolerance, right? And then the ability to kind of withstand the ups and downs and the two-way door or one-way door conversations or decision making, because sometimes not making any decision, like you said, is the right choice. It's like, I think a lot of that comes down to sort of medical intervention decisions in people's lives. I've heard that if you just wait, the majority of your kind of medical issues will go away. Again, not globally, but I think, if you sort of even, jam your finger or something, instead of going to an emergency room, you can just wait, or like you cut a hand. You don't go to the doctor every time you cut your finger or something, or get a paper cut. So if you just wait, a lot of those things will kind of correct themselves.
Yeah.
However,
So,
they might also get infected and you might die.
exactly.
Right.
So,
So just
it's
like, where do you get the acumen to kind of understand which one is which? Because again, indecision is a problem sometimes, and making a decision when you shouldn't is also a problem. So it's like, how do you mitigate between those two kind of polar opposites?
well,
And I know it depends.
it, uh, the only teacher is really experience, and sometimes your experience is one teacher, someone else's experience it's a better teacher, because then you have to learn on yourself. But whatever you do, always count on getting it wrong, because nobody's a perfect decision maker. That just doesn't exist. So either you have, you lower your ego and you make a correction to your decision. So in your example, you cut your finger and you're like, I'll be fine. Like it's just a little cut. And then, you wake up the next morning and you're like, it's not looking so good. So you go to the doctor and you correct your earlier decision. Now, if you wait a month, then all of a sudden, you got to get your finger lopped off, and that's not fun. But, you can probably correct your incorrect conclusion from the day before and go to the doctor and be like, oh, we got infected. And they'll treat it with antibiotics or whatever it is. And, you apply the topical cream for a week and you're better. So you corrected your earlier mistake and you went on with life. But if you doubled down and said, the day before, I'm not going to the doctor, and that's just how I live my life, I don't do that.
Yeah, it's bad.
Then you might end up with no finger or no hand.
Right.
That's it. You just correct your mistakes, and sometimes you can't, but most of the time you can.
Yeah, just don't make any final kind of stances on things that shouldn't be final, especially in business, because you don't know how a lot of these decisions are going to pan out. You ultimately want to make a decision, whether it's to wait or not to wait, or do something, and then you monitor, right? And you set kind of thresholds in your mind or on paper, where at which point should you then intervene and change course, right? That's typically the way to do it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So you sort of, you make the decision. Before you make the decision, you think of all the potential outcomes that the decision might bring, whether it's, up the channel or down the channel. And you set milestones as to, all right, if the line starts going down, all of a sudden we have to intervene and maybe change course. And then you kind of have to map all that out before you make the decision. And then you monitor and see what happens and either let it go and intervene or not, or be
Yeah.
prepared to live with four fingers.
Yeah. But also, you're in a business, so you have people. When you're at a certain size, you have people, and it's just letting them know this is what is happening. And people being comfortable with, if something isn't going well, then it's okay to you speak up and you correct it. It's not the worst thing that can happen is so and so said this is how we're doing it, and therefore this is how we're gonna do it, and come hell or high water, we're just gonna follow that path. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's culture in a business, and that's a culture you want to avoid.
Yeah, and then how do you then deal with that? Because a lot of times you're coming in obviously as an employee or a consultant or somebody who's being brought in into a family that's already established, and they have established values and established standards and kind of established culture. And so then how do you navigate, as somebody who's coming in, the sort of, again, the polar opposites of having transparency, and sort of freedom of saying how things are versus the fear of being blamed or being sort of the guy that shouldn't be saying certain things but is, because that's a very hard thing to do, because again, it's like everybody imagines that they are in a healthy culture, but coming into a large company, especially, the larger they are, the more kind of the more sick they potentially could be, right? Because again, the smaller the company, the probably owner operator ran. There's a lot of sort of culture that's riding on the personality of the owner, and again, that could be the good thing and that could be a bad thing. In larger companies, a lot of that is based on sort of the team you build, and all those people are sort of people that are coming into the company that don't they have kind of skin in the game, but not necessarily the same as the owner. And so the culture that they build could potentially be different than the one the owner would. And so again, how do you navigate both of those sides?
Well, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it, and everything
Absolutely.
would be perfect everywhere all the time. Um, you assess where you are and assess what's going on, and at different areas, in different departments and different people and different levels of your career, you'll see where things stand, and the look at areas where you feel like you can make a difference and try to do that. And don't, generally it's not by being the loudest person who says that they have all the answers. But usually it's incremental change, just one step at a time. And sometimes it's, the culture of the organization, it's both a positive and negative. The organization, you hear the expression a lot where nobody's bigger than the company.
Hmm.
So what happens is the culture of the organization is really almost never smaller than the person. So the culture is going to overtake the person, to your point, and it can only change with, you can only control yourself, so you can't control anybody
Mm-hmm.
else. So if you want to make a change, then you make a small change, and that comes with approaching your teammates and saying, hey, I'm thinking of doing this. What do you guys think? Or maybe it's doing it and saying, I did this, like, I saw these results. maybe we should be doing this more, or given going to your boss and saying that or doing that, and like asking him how you can help, or saying, hey, I see that this is a problem. Would you mind if I take a stab at trying to solve it? And over time, incrementally, things can change. But typically, change is slow until it's not, until it happens all at
Mm-hmm.
once. So,
Right. Reaches a tipping point, and then basically it kind of goes, right?
yeah, there's a this is near and dear to both of our hearts here. There's a Lenin quote, where not, I'm gonna get it wrong, but something like, sometimes it takes decades to change something, but then decades change in weeks or something like that.
Mm.
I got it completely
Mm-hmm.
wrong, but basically that was his way of saying, like, revolution builds, and then all of a sudden it comes to a crescendo, like you said, and
Mm-hmm.
it changes completely,
Right.
in the blink of an eye.
Yeah.
So,
It's like this
you know,
this day is like 20 years in the making, essentially.
yeah, and you see, I mean, another way to think about it is you look at compounding interest. So you've heard like, if you get a penny and you double how much you have,
Mm-hmm.
every day, in 30 days you're going to have, I think, more than 1 million. But on
Mm.
day 20 you're not going to have that much, but you only get that compounding effect at the very, very end.
Right.
So that's
That's right. I heard it in terms of, if you fold the piece of paper something like 6 times, it becomes this tall, and then it's like the seventh time it's double the size, and the eighth time or something, the 10th time, it's basically all the way to the moon. It's the distance. It's like the compounding interest effect, because the thickness essentially multiplies
mm,
exponentially with every fold.
mm-hmm, that's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
that, that's interesting, because I've never really gone through corporate. It's essentially the fear of, the slow moving, red tape, kind of indecision, poor culture. And again, this is in my own mind. I'm not sure. I'm not saying that this is a thing in all cultures, obviously, corporate cultures, has
Yeah.
always kept me away from corporate and into small business, because I felt that, in small businesses, whether it's yours or whether you're working for somebody else in a small business, you have a lot more power, and responsibility to change things. It's like it's
Mm-hmm,
very difficult to hide, in some division or department and
mm-hmm,
sort of cruise through and get your salary. And many people do that, and that's fine. Again, this isn't a blame or an assessment of any sort. I just, you know, personally, I like the responsibility of change, and I like the responsibility of progress. And I feel that it's much easier to achieve that in a small company rather than a large company.
yeah, that's generally the case, and I mean, you're describing exactly, for personally, why I like working in that kind of 20 to 100 million, and everyone's number is going to be different of where they like to be, but
Mm-hmm.
that's why I like it, because you have a chance to make a significant impact, but and it's not, and you could see the changes immediately on the because it annoys me don't when I don't think of the things the right way. So the penny example, so on day 31 you have $10 million.
Mm,
On day 15 you have 163.
I see.
So that's that's a scale of change that happens. So for 2 weeks you see not much, and then at the very end you see everything.
Yeah, it's hard to kind of live through those 2 weeks, because, again, taking this example to other aspects of life, it's essentially, it's like people can say, nothing's happening for me, nothing's working. I'm doing like all these things, and basically it's like, a month or 6 months or a year, maybe I'm looking for a job, and I'm doing all these applications and nothing's happening. And the minute they quit, they're essentially a day away from something doubling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. I mean, things take time, and and there's also a lot of luck involved. There's luck and happenstance of, meeting the right person at the right time, or meeting the wrong person at the wrong time, or just not meeting anybody. There's so many things that can happen, and you just never know. So kind of just being uncomfortable, putting yourself out there, and being in as many situations as possible to potentially be in the right situation. And you may do everything right and still not get it. But your
Yeah, and a lot of
chances
people,
increase. Your chances increase. But your guarantee of success doesn't exist.
yeah, that's absolutely true. And a lot of people have a hard time with that. And like, even personally, knowing that, I'm still having a hard time with it kind of emotionally, because you could be doing, because, it's like, I just thought about this the other week. I'm like, they say if you do everything right, good things will happen, but there are situations where you're doing everything right and nothing is happening. It's like, how can that be? And maybe the answer is just not yet.
No, it may be never.
It may be
It
never
may
too, right?
it may be never. And that's you see all these motivational videos and quotes, and it's like, I persevered. It's like, yeah, but there's all these people that worked hard and persevered, and you never hear about them because it never happened for them, because it just didn't it didn't work out. I mean,
Right.
things are a product of their time. I don't know. I mean, I love history, and you look at history, and it's you look at a guy like Nikola Tesla, brilliant guy, but he, he last, I think, 10 years of his life, he was destitute completely, because he didn't, every place where he went where somebody would steal his idea, and that's what happened to him over and over, and he never got to monetize, and he never got, the credit until after his life of all his accomplishments. So it may never happen, and very few people are as brilliant as him. And if it didn't happen for him, I mean, what makes you think it'll happen for you? It probably
Right.
won't. It may not, but it might. So if you don't try, it definitely won't.
Yeah. Still better to keep going, right? What's the
That's
alternative? The better question is, what's the alternative? Because it's like plenty
exactly.
of great artists died poor,
Hmm.
regardless of how valuable their paintings are now.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
However, again, they could have not painted, and they still would
Yeah.
have been poor.
Yeah. Yeah. So you over time, you try to find whatever it is that you do. You try to find enjoyment in the process and the pursuit, and the end goal, it really ultimately never exists. It's just, you're just going, like, once you achieve something, you're on to the next thing, and that's just how it is. So you either like the journey and enjoy pursuing it, and even if you achieve, now you're pursuing something else. You that that's just what it is. You have to find something that you enjoy and keep going at it. But
It's an
back to
interesting
finance.
outlook from somebody who looks at the numbers all day.
That's right.
If you're basically right, because I think before before we recorded this thing, we talked about how do you balance sort of the pragmatism of the numbers and the data with sort of the emotional decision making that pretty much everybody goes through. And it's a hard thing to do because everybody's like, oh, look at the numbers, look at the data will tell you, it's all facts. It's like, no, man, even with all the facts and the data, you still have to be able to read that and derive some meaning out of it, and that is not found in the numbers, in my opinion.
Yeah, and to me, I enjoy data and numbers. I enjoy when things are organized. And when you have that, then I do think you get better decision making. Not perfect, but better. And the kind of what is to me I'm an accountant by trade, so the fundamentals are accounting. And yes, you are literally it's called you're a bean counter when you're an accountant. And people chafe at that name, but I think it's very appropriate, because you're counting beans. But if you're counting beans, then maybe you're a coffee grower. It's like, well, what kind of beans do you have? Do you have small beans, big beans, medium
Hmm.
beans? What's the type? Are you like, what soil are you planting them in? What elevation are you planting them in? Where's the best possible outcome for the beans that you're counting? And then you better make sure when you harvest them that, if you harvested 1,200,000 beans, then you should know that that's how many you have, and that's how many you sold, and that's how many you paid your team for harvesting, and you got the right amount for the type of bean that you harvested and that you sold, and you're counting that along the way and making sure that you're accurate in what you did. You're keeping score. And when you keep score, then you make a decision on what the score is as far as what your next move is. And if you don't know what the score is, it's much more difficult to make your next move. You're doing it blind. So, yeah, the data leads you to decisions, but you have to know it doesn't give you a guarantee of outcome of results, but you have a higher probability of success by
Yeah.
doing your bean counting.
Yeah.
So my fundamental is that. Everyone's fundamental, if you're doing IT work, then you have a different fundamental of how you do it. But if your source code is not, if you have lots of bugs in your code and you're constantly debugging, and instead of changing the infrastructure, you're constantly doing lines of code to correct the last line of code. Well, all you're doing is perpetuating the issue. So it's all building blocks of organization to me, and everyone's organizing things differently.
Right. Yeah, I think it's also because you understand the context behind it. It's like you can be a specialist, but you still have to be a generalist enough to understand how this specialty fits in the greater picture. Because it's like, yeah, it's the trees, but it's got to be the forest. It's like
Mm-hmm.
you can be, an accountant, but if you don't understand how that data or those numbers affect the rest of the organization or why they matter, then you're not a very good accountant, in my opinion.
Yeah, but it's seeing the forest for the trees, but you also got to remember you have to actually have one tree
Hmm.
to start to and have a whole bunch of single trees to have a
Hmm.
forest. It works the other way too. It's
Mm.
both. It's both. It's not one or the other. It's both.
Right. That's right. So is your background is in accounting or finance? Like, what did you study in school?
I studied accounting and tax.
Okay. So why didn't you go into tax
I did go into
unless you
tax.
did?
I did
Oh,
go
you
into
did go
tax.
into tax.
Yeah, I did go into tax. And it just wasn't logical enough for me, because the way the tax code
Mm.
works, it's whoever, from a practical standpoint, whoever lobbied for the best laws, that's how the tax code is written. And there's some things that are logical about it and some things that are not logical. And in order to be, you can have, it's definitely a business to be good at tax and to advise people on tax, like tax strategies and all that. And you have to know those things. But I didn't, the more I learned, the less I'm like, I don't, it's too illogical for me to pursue the next however many years of my life to doing that. So
To become a CPA.
I am a CPA,
Oh,
but
you
to
are a
be,
CPA.
uh
Okay.
yeah, but most CPAs are actually not tax people. It's it's kind of the generalization. So most CPAs don't do tax. Most CPAs do audit. They do, or they just don't even practice accounting, like public accounting, where they do tax and audit. But enough people, and you don't actually have to be a CPA to do tax. There's actually nothing you have to be. You can just do tax returns. As long as you're not the main person filing them, it doesn't take much to even be a filer of a tax return. You hardly have to know what you're doing. So there's no like regulatory requirements of what it is to be a tax preparer.
That's crazy. I imagined that it's a more regulated industry, but I guess it's not. I mean, to a degree, I'm sure.
Yeah, you're signing somebody's return as a paid preparer. There are some, I don't know all the rules, but there are some responsibilities that you bear of but look,
Accuracy and right.
accuracy, but
It's
it's if
whatever they
somebody's
tell you. It's you again.
exactly.
You're only interpreting it. It's like they can
Exactly.
lie to you basically throughout the entire return, and you can file it, and it's like that's what they
Yeah,
told me.
it's not quite that straightforward because maybe you should have known better. So if somebody's doing money laundering and you're signing off on their fraudulent returns, and it's like, well, it's just what they told me. Well, you should have known
Yeah,
better.
right.
You're going to be responsible. But but if you step back, like, yeah, there's no regulatory body that says in order to have somebody pay you for filing a tax return, you have to have a certain credential. You don't. But that's kind of going off on a tangent. But yeah, I study tax, but I'm like, it's part of what I do now. Like I understand tax, and I could talk to tax people about whatever it is the tax strategy is, or whatever it is that the compliance thing is. I understand it, and I can speak to it, but I it's a small fraction of kind of what I do and what I enjoy doing. So that's ultimately why I didn't choose to just do tax.
Yeah, I imagine corporate kind of finance is more exciting. There's a lot more. It's a better painting. Let's put it
Well,
that way.
depends on. For me, it is. For other people, they love tax and they love
Mm-hmm.
all the intricacies of it, and they can, do things in the tax code that legal strategies that are very advanced, and they enjoy doing that. They bring lots of value to either their clients or whether that be individual people or companies or whatever, and they love it, and that's awesome because that's needed. So everyone
Mm-hmm.
finds hopefully you figure out what you're good at, and you pursue that, and you enjoy it, and everyone does and enjoys different things, and that's what makes a society. So
Yeah, very interesting. Interesting that you had a CPA, and so did you work in corporate? Did you basically like went to school and then out of school you ended up in a
yeah,
company, and then
yeah,
at some
I work
point you were like kind of done with this. I'm going to consult.
yeah, so I've out of college, I went to public accounting,
Mm-hmm.
like one of the big four accounting firms. did tax, then I got out of tax, did some corporate accounting and got into operations and did, various roles within finance and operations, did a couple stints as a CFO at companies, and then, got into consulting, doing CFO consulting as my own company for others.
Mm-hmm. And that's what you do now.
That's what I do now, yeah.
Yeah. You like it more than working for, again, I'm sure it has its ups and downs. It's, the whole picture is on a daily, you can look at it as a day trader or you can look at it as a long-term investments. Like overall, it's great, but daily it's an up and down.
Yeah, I love it. I love the I love helping clients. You get a different sense of satisfaction when you're helping a client than when you are, or not you, I get a different sense of satisfaction when I'm helping a client than I did as an employee helping my company.
Mm-hmm.
It's personal, and that's ultimately what it is. So I enjoy it, and that's why I'm pursuing it.
No, it's great. That's great. And I imagine the operational experience helped too. Again, look at the forest better.
Hopefully that's the case.
Yeah, I think once you get into operations and you kind of start seeing things from tying all these little parts together into how do you make a company function in the most profitable way possible. It really sort of ties things in because I'm traditionally a sales guy, so I come from a sales
Mm-hmm.
background, and I pretty much sold on business development, partnerships, kind of all relationships based stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then I ended up opening up a packaging company, ended up in operations. I mean, I ended up in operations prior, but essentially, for myself, I ended up in operations, and I'm like, there's a lot more to this than basically just generating the revenue and the growth. It's like, how do you make sure all those things keep the business open daily, and then you start, efficiencies and optimization of all parts of the process, and establishing systems and standards and processes. And I'm like, oh shit, I like this more. And I became basically the operations guy.
Yeah, it's all got to fit together, and you lean on your experience of what you know, what you're best at, and hopefully you understand the other pieces, and that's you get to a company of a certain scale, and you can hire some of those pieces that you're not as good at, and they complement what you do, and then eventually you can hire even the things that even what your competencies are. There's people that are more competent than you by focusing on just that competency.
Yep.
That's what happens as you grow. But that ultimately it is kind of putting everything together when you're running a business. Everything's got to work. No sales, no business. But no output, you can sell whatever you want. If you don't have an output, then again, you don't have a business.
Yeah, if you don't
So it's
deliver
all
on
got to
it, for
work
sure.
together.
For
It's
sure.
all got to work
And
together.
yeah, and so going back to our example of North Pole Inc. They have the office going. They have kind of set up their U.S. operations. What are the first three things they need to start measuring? Like what KPIs are, if you have to prioritize them for a new company that's being established, or a new office, or a new division that's being established? Like what are the main things that you would start with?
Everything. Every company's going to
I know
have its
everything
own
matters.
No, every company's going to have its own metrics of kind of leading indicators of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
But they all stem from really three things: sales, cash, and profitability. And then if you break each of those down into subcategories, they can provide indicators of what's going on. So let's keeping on your North Pole example. If sales, it's like, well, what's a leading indicator for sales? I don't know how many parents have signed up for your service. So, you're tracking that, and then, obviously it's you're doing all your deliveries on one day. It's hard to track that, but let's say everyone's celebrating different holidays, and you got the multi-denominational Santa Claus, and you want to be looking at how many deliveries are you doing in a given day, and that's going to give you an indicator of sales. Or you might look at kind of your gross profit. So you might have your loss leader toys and your highly profitable toys, and you want to be tracking each of those units or categories specifically as a call out of where your profits are going to go. How many packages you're delivering in a day, how much cash you have remaining, how many weeks of cash do you have on hand, or months of cash, or however you want to measure it. Burn rate, run rate, whatever. Every company is going to have different metrics. If you're running an e-commerce company, then your lifetime value or your cost per customer acquisition is important.
Yeah, right.
If you're I don't know, if you're a software provider, then and you're B2B, then your metrics are going to look different. So every company is going to be different, but they all stem from sales, profitability, and cash.
Sales, profitability, and cash. So sales obviously determines, in layman terms, that's revenue, right?
Yeah.
Profitability, we're talking about kind of margins, and so that's that's sales revenue minus your operational cost, minus cost of goods sold, right?
Yeah.
In a product-centric company. And then cash on hand is basically cash flow. It's accounts receivables versus accounts payables, and how long versus your operational costs. We want to make sure you're able to pay salaries, and you have enough receivables coming in to be able to do that for as long as you can.
Yeah. That, you probably have debt. So you got to make sure your coverage ratios are right, your compliance is right with the bank, and you're seeing out and looking at, what those ratios are going to be in future months as you're forecasting. But ultimately, and you're measuring that and looking at that all the time. But ultimately, it's cash. How much cash do you have? How much access to debt do you have? That's your cash.
And then, so what are the risks of maybe neglecting one of those aspects? Because, for kind of entrepreneurial smaller businesses, there's a lot of concentration specifically on growth, right? Because you're in growing mode, and so you're concentrating on sales, you're concentrating on revenue. And so I find that a lot of times that concentration and sort of tunnel vision on revenue alone creates potential cash problems, or creates potential revenue issues. And so what's sort of the proper, is it 33, 33, 33 between the three? Or is it like, how do you sort of juggle between all of them at any given moment? And I know it depends on the company size and sort of their established presence and, the type of business they're in. But, if you have to sort of, like, I've always liked, for example, profitability. Like, if the business isn't making money, like, why the fuck are you doing it? Now, profitability is also kind of a sliding scale, because you could look at profitability on a sales versus cost of goods sold basis. That's profitability. You can look at profitability on how long you're hanging on to the money, and how much that money is working for you in the meantime, even if you're making less margin. You can look at profitability as kind of a long-term metric. Like, what's your exit strategy? Am I really just basically trying to build a $500 million company on the revenue side that makes literally no profit, and then I'm just offloading it to, another conglomerate. Like, how do you sort of juggle those things between themselves?
Yeah, I think so you're right. My accountant and lawyer answer is going to be it depends.
Right.
But let's maybe look at an example. You're a growing company and you're looking at revenue. Well, if you're unit economics, maybe you're, I don't know, look at a freemium kind of software as a service SaaS company. So you're acquiring a whole bunch of subscriptions, and over time you hope to turn them into
Paying customers.
paying customers, paid subscriptions, and hopefully they'll stick around for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as you move forward, if you have a free, and forget about being some sort of crazy, Facebook or YouTube unicorn, just you're just a regular, you're not a rocket ship company.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Assume you're not going to be a rocket ship. You want to be a rocket ship, but assume you won't be.
Right.
So you're growing, and it's like, well, are they actually becoming paying customers? And let's say it's all paid. Forget about free, but so you've paid subscriptions, and it's you're collecting it $50 a month at a time, but you have all these coders and all these all this overhead that has to create this product. Well, so you're going to say, well, I need to get to, I don't know, to cover my costs, I need to get to X level of sales to do that. But you need to understand how long people stick around for. What's the lifetime value of those customers? What are the unit economics of once they're on board? So yeah, you have that huge shift, huge investment to get them on board, but over time, do you have good gross margins that you can maintain those customers profitably? And what's your access to funding? That, like, how long do you have of a runway to grow before you run out of money? And you're always looking at that, and you're always measuring that, and you have that at the front of your mind on a daily basis. And you're just keeping score, and that allows you to make good decisions, so that if you see that you're going to run out of money in 6 months, well, you either maybe you should charge more, maybe you should go fundraise, maybe you should do both, maybe you should cut staff. I don't know. At the end, you got to look at the situation of whatever it is, but it allows you to know that you need to make a decision on certain things, how long you have to make it, and what your options are.
Yeah.
You get that all by keeping score.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost not a trinity. It's like there's multiple factors there. It's not just, sales, profit, cash flow. It's like there's an operational cost. There's all kinds of things in that little circle of things that allow you to tweak and turn to ensure you have the longest runway and, long-term profitability, but also growth. Because you're right. I think all those things matter. It just depends on sort of where you stand.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So yeah, I don't know. That's it in a nutshell, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's pretty good, man. We've actually covered a lot of stuff. One thing I ask everybody: do you have a book you can recommend? What's something good you've read recently that?
So I am I love history, and this is an absurd book. It's a lot of pages, like a lot of pages, but it's fascinating. So it's called A Distant Mirror by Barbara Tuchman. It came out, I don't know, like late 70s. It's basically a look at the 14th century Europe through the eyes of, one like nobleman, French nobleman, and all the things happening around it with the 100-Year War, Black Death, all those things, and it's just a fascinating thing. So the book name, A Distant Mirror, basically says like these people were just like us, like we're not special. These people were just like us, experiencing the same things that we're experiencing today. Good luck, bad luck, uh, being competent, being incompetent, what that means, what the, kind of what the politics of the day mean when you have a succession rule and you get a competent ruler and all of a sudden they drop dead and their kid inherits the throne and they don't know, they're not competent. Here's the repercussions to society, and how much of it you have control over and how much you don't. And I don't know, it makes you think what a great time to be alive, because this you read that and you're like, man, we live in the best time ever. It's never
Agreed.
been. We got indoor plumbing, we got air conditioning, we have everything's at the tip of your fingers. I mean, things have never been better.
Completely agree. And you're absolutely right in that regard, that human thinking and sort of human motivations and human behavior doesn't really change over time. What changes is kind of the world around us, and we adapt to new technology, new things, new innovations. But overall, the motivations are the same. We're primitive monkeys, essentially, kind of floating in a very technological space.
That's right. Human nature has not changed, and it probably will not change. The culture of the day changes, but human nature doesn't.
It's a great place to end.
All right.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Take care.